I'm Chris Vestal, and this is DCSLA Radio. The following is the audio from Part 3 of the Library Leaders Series interview with Blane Dessy, Executive Director of FLICC and Fedlink at the Library of Congress. For more information about DCSLA and our upcoming events, visit our website at www.dc.sla.org.
Welcome to the inaugural podcast of GCSLA's interview series, Library Leaders. Library Leaders is based on a series of programs the Washington, D.C. chapter of SLA held in 2010, in which we ask leaders in our community to sit down with us and share their knowledge and experience with leadership, career development, and the profession in general. The programs were so successful that we've invited the original participants to come back and do it again, this time for a recorded interview that we can share with the SLA membership at large. It's Wednesday, October 26, 2011. I'm Mary Talley, President of DCSLA.
And I'm Chris Vestal, the 2011 Communications Secretary for DCSLA.
And we're here today with Blane Dessy, Executive Director of FLICC, Fedlink. And Chris and I feel very, very fortunate to get to interview Blane again. If you're going to make a movie out of Blane's life and his career, actually, a good title might be Blane's Excellent Adventure. He's had such an interesting and successful career. It seems to us as if he's been on a career-long adventure, culminating in his current position as the Executive Director of FLICC Fedlink. I mean, you're teaching at Catholic, and you teach federal government, a class in federal?
Well, I teach management.
You do teach management. In
the fall semester, and then I've started to teach the Federal Libraries Institute, which is normally in the late spring, early summer, which is a 1-week concentrated 3-credit program. So I teach 2 different things.
Okay. The management it really intrigues me because how do you think at mid-level and even for those that are in graduate school now, how do we get these management skills? How do we prepare them? How are we preparing? Are we preparing them well enough to take on these new roles, particularly in the area of management and leadership? And then how do you acquire these skills when you're mid-level if you don't have it? I think it's a big issue.
That's a big question.
That is a big question, and I'll take a stab at it, and I may change my thinking halfway through the first sentence. I think that librarians and information managers need to learn about management. But I think that in a way they need to learn about it apart from the traditional library context. For example, the textbook that I use to teach management is not a library science management. It's a book used primarily in MBA programs. And we talk about management broadly enough. So we talk about all the management issues, and we draw connections to the library and information science field. But one of the things I want the students to learn is that management as a discipline is something apart from library science. I mean,
you're right.
They intersect in a lot of ways, but you just can't say I'm a librarian, therefore I'm a manager. I mean, there's a different skill set, there's a different perspective that you have to adopt, and I don't think we necessarily do that well enough in library school. I think we're very good at teaching people how to be technically proficient, but I don't know that we teach people how to really think strategically.
Yeah.
For the long run. And in fact, if I have a gripe about library science education, in that in some ways it's too technically grounded. I see everyone scurrying to learn HTML or to learn this, and I'm there. HTML is going to be gone in 3 years. So I don't want it to be a trade school. I want it to be a professional school. So I think we need to do a much better job of sort of teaching students about the management issues. And in fact, as a professional, you're going to be managing something. That's my other mantra. It may be a committee, it may be a project, it may be a tiny acquisitions budget, but you're going to be managing something. Or, most importantly, you're going to be managing yourself. Right? You're going to be managing how you interact with the world and how you advance your career.
Right, how you're developing.
And managing yourself is an important part of that. So I think that's one thing. I think we also need to teach librarians that it's okay to leave librarianship behind at some point. Not that you lose your commitment to the values or your commitment to the ethics, but it's okay to say, I'm really not a librarian anymore. In fact, one of my opportunities, I got out of graduate school, became a public library director. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to a program that no longer exists. Miami University in Ohio had, in their School of Business Administration, advanced training for library executives.
Wow! I've never heard that.
And it was a 2-summer program. So you went one summer, and then you went back the second summer. It was taught by all business faculty on how to be a library executive. And it was in this idyllic, if you've ever been to Miami University, it's this gorgeous Georgian campus. And the first day of class, we were sitting there, and we were told, you are no longer librarians. You are now managers. You're now executives. You are no longer librarians. And that has stayed with me.
Oh, it's a very interesting perspective.
That you are now at that point where you're talking about strategic planning, you're talking about human resources, you're talking about a raft of things. Yes, you could be talking about libraries, but you could also be talking about something else. And we need to see ourselves as being more than just the MLS. And we need to know when to put that MLS aside and move on to something else. So that's how I would change library science education. Plus, I don't think library science education is demanding enough in terms of presentation and writing.
Right.
I make my students write a lot, and they hate it. But at the end of the class, they always say, gee, we're really glad we did that, because now we feel so much more comfortable being able to write. And I'm there, well, yeah, I know it's painful. But the only way you learn to write is to write.
Right, and have somebody critique it. And
then write some more. And I know it's painful.
From a good writer.
And it really helps if you can write well and write fast. That's yes. Because sometimes in the real world you only have an hour to write something, or you only, many times I've been given documents, read this and write something, we need it back in 60 minutes. And it's like, yeah. So you learn very quickly how to put paragraphs together. But I don't think we stress that enough in librarianship. And I know it sounds very old-fashioned. People are saying we must teach the latest technologies. It's like, how about English grammar?
But it kind of does sound like the latest technology there, because you're using writing and social media, Twitter, blog posts.
Right,
so.
Right. I mean, although much of the writing out there is not grammatical or well put together.
Right.
But if you really want attention, or if you want to put yourself out there, you have to do it well.
Right. You see, and I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I mean, I really get annoyed when I get emails or things, and they're filled with grammatical errors or lack of capitalization. And I know it's like, oh, this is the new age, right? It's like, no, this is your native tongue. And I know I sound like the old Catholic nuns that used to teach me, but put a period there, capital. I mean, and so I always say to people, yes, I get the fact that you want to use, all these little abbreviations and things, but I said, one of your most important tools is your language. And English is such a robust language. Why do you want to dumb it down?
And you still have to communicate. You have to be communicating with the other person.
Well, and
if you're not getting the point across.
Well, and also, it's fine if you're communicating with your friend across the street, but as a professional, as a director, you're writing for broader audiences. Right? You can't afford to be careless. You can't afford to assume that people know what this means. You have to write very clearly, very succinctly, very convincingly. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to tweet someone and use, characters or something, but at the same time, if I say, Chris, I need you to write a memo to the Librarian of Congress explaining why we want to do something, I expect you as a professional. I need you to be able to sit down and say, okay, I can write a memo. I can, it'll be all grammatically correct. It'll flow. It'll have a beginning and a middle and an end. It'll end with. I mean, and I expect that of you as a professional. I mean, I think that when you come to me as an MLS, I should be able to assume you have a strong grasp of our mother tongue. I'm appalled when I see some of this stuff, by the way.
I understand what you're saying, but I also think that some of it's generational, because I think I see the younger generation getting stuff out very quickly.
Right.
Trying to push it out because things are happening so quickly.
Exactly.
There's a trade-off there.
Well, it is.
I'm a perfectionist, and it takes me a very long time to write anything. So
there is a trade-off, and again, it's bounded by how fast you have to do something the audience for whom you're writing. And so I think you can have lots of different styles, but I also think that when you really have to write at that high level, you're able to do it.
Right.
I mean, when they say, I really need you to write something that's going to be well-constructed, thoughtful, coherent, you should be able to do that, and grammatically correct.
Maybe not in 60 minutes.
No, maybe not in 60. Maybe you can have 2 whole days to do it. But I think that as a professional, you need to be able to do that. Now, that doesn't say it won't be edited. Trust me, we're in a bureaucracy, so Shakespeare would be edited, But you should be able to be comfortable enough to do it, and not be too challenged by it, I don't think. But that's, again, I was an English major. I have my biases, But I have many biases, so don't get me started.
I'm concerned about how we educate and how we move forward as a profession, and I think this is a big gap.
Well, it is, because it's, if you don't want to call it writing and speaking, let's just call it communication.
I think communication in general.
Let's just say that there is a profound lack of strong communication skills that a lot of younger graduates have, and I think there's a role in any education to sort of pound that into people. It's like, this is your native language. Again, I sound like those old Catholic nuns, they would always say to us, people will judge you by the first things that come out of your mouth. Right? If it's incorrect, if it's poorly pronounced,
if it doesn't make sense.
If it doesn't make sense, you're judged to be non-credit-worthy.
Right.
And so it's one of those old-fashioned rules, and I tell that to the students. You have to be able to write. You have to be able to, on a moment's notice sometimes, you have to be able to get up there in front of a crowd and explain a position. And you have to be able to put sentences together.
A lot of librarians will tell you that's not why they went to.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'll have a lot of mid-career professionals that are like, I didn't become a librarian because I want to do this. I want to be a backdoor or a backroom librarian.
But those positions are going away. There are very few. I think that we still attract people who want to sit quietly somewhere. But we really... You can't survive in our profession anymore.
No, and I think that if that's really what you want to do, if that's as far as your ambition is taking you, that's fine. But then don't expect good changes to come to you either.
Well,
if you're willing to say,
for those people too.
I do too. I do too. Well, whether it's technology, whether it's offsourcing. I mean, I can find people in India who could probably catalog better and faster at a fifth of the rate I mean, when I was at Justice, we were so surprised to learn that a lot of law firms are outsourcing their legal research to India.
Right. Some of them are starting to bring it back, too, because it didn't work out.
It didn't work out too well.
Because there's
and what some of them are also doing, then they're also what they call insourcing. So they're just finding cheaper parts of the country. So they're going to places like Arkansas or Mississippi where you can pay people a half and still get some better quality. So, I think you have to stay competitive.
Right.
And I think you have to stay a little bit hungry, you have to always be thinking, what do I need to be doing now to keep myself?
And what skills do I need?
This may be kind of off topic somewhat, but you were talking about doing the procurement for other federal agencies that are non-libraries. Do you see doing more training, too, for federal agencies that aren't traditional libraries or aren't libraries at all? Would they benefit from some of it?
Well, they will in ways that are a little bit different for us. When we've done training in the past, it's generally been to librarians or library technicians. We envision doing training for more non-librarians, but we look at it in terms of more procurement training, strategic sourcing, things like that. So not traditional, we're not going to offer traditional library training to procurement officers. So we will be offering training to this other community, but it's going to be a different type of training. It's going to be how to, in fact, the term that one firm uses is vendor portfolio management.
Wow.
I love these euphemisms.
All right. So if you're buying, $1 million worth of databases, how do you know you're buying the right databases? How do you know that you're getting the best deal for those databases? How do you know you're not buying redundant data because of these bundling policies that aggregators have? How do you know that your users are really exploiting these resources to the fullest? So there's this whole idea that these are skills that people need to have, even if they're not librarians, even if they're just the people buying these databases.
Particularly if
they need to have sort of a framework by which to go by. And so it's all about. So it's called, it's called vendor portfolio management. And some people use, other people use information resource management. But how do you know what you're buying?
Well, in anything.
In anything, right? I mean, so, we were always surprised when we would buy both Lexis and Westlaw, how much redundant material we were buying.
Right. Well, yes, but.
Right. And you can't separate it, right? And then what we would find out is that, some of the stuff on Westlaw that was free, we had on Westlaw for a fee. So it wasn't enough to know that we had both. You had to know that if I went to Lexis for this data, I would get it under our flat rate subscription. If I went to Westlaw, it was an additional fee. So you had to even know
what to use when.
What tool to use when to get the same data.
Right. And at a reasonable cost.
At a reasonable cost. So and what do your licenses say? Who can use it?
Thing. Right.
So there are all these sort of management issues having to do with information that go beyond traditional librarian training. Right? So.
Way beyond.
Yeah.
Way beyond. And you don't have to be a librarian. Attorneys need this stuff because all of our contracts go through attorneys before they're signed. So do the attorneys know what to read for? Do the acquisitions people know when they get these licenses, do they really know what they're reading? Probably not. And so
I'd let you do it.
Well, exactly. Well, and that's exactly right. And so that's one of the things that when we do some of this strategic sourcing, we want to go out there and say to people, one of the training services we can provide for you is how do you think about all this information you're buying to make sure you're getting the most for the least, that it's really what people need, that your licenses are really what you want them to be, and somehow you're not paying for more than you are using, or somehow you're not buying the right piece of that database that you, I mean, there are lots of right. So, I just use the term vendor portfolio management because the firm, the firm is saying Outsell. I'll give them credit. And you've heard of Outsell probably. Mm-hmm. Right. And they do a lot of work with what they call the information industry, which is not necessarily libraries.
Right. Yeah. It's not.
It's all the big financial institutions. It's all the big healthcare institutions. It's all the big insurance institutions. And they do a lot of this kind of training.
Okay.
And it focuses on buying for the enterprise.
Right.
And then buying strategically for the enterprise. And that's where I want to go with some of our things.
You want to be outside for the government?
Well, we've talked about partnering with them to take their training and make it available, because they've already got training modules on this very issue. Yeah. So could we partner with them to make their training available? So we'll see. Lots of changes in the wind.
Lots of big changes.
Well, that's how I keep myself from getting bored, man.
One of our questions last week was, what do you do for fun when you're not working 7 days a week?
Well, I teach.
You must do some reading.
I'm the president of the Arlington Friends group. So on some nights I'm at the public library working. I do a lot of reading. And I have a condo in Arlington where I live during the week, but I also have a home in Harper's Ferry. Where I go to relax.
How beautiful. It's beautiful there.
I was there this past weekend. It was so stunning. Everything is red and orange and gold, and you're on these back country roads. And so I go to the country and pretend I don't have to work for a living.
When you do that, do you have an internet? You have Wi-Fi there, and you can. So you're always still. That's always a problem, no matter where you go.
Well, I should admit, it sounds very rustic, but I have this house out there. It's got central air. It's got all the things that you would want. Of course, yeah. And I do have, Wi-Fi connection and stuff like that. So, yeah.
You have to, because you probably go out there and work sometimes.
I do. Right. I have a notebook.
If you're not unplugged, I was just...
No, I have a notebook, and I go out there and I can stay in touch with the world, and do all that sort of stuff.
Oh, lovely.
So I can sit on the screened-in porch or the back porch.
Sounds fabulous. So you can be kind of...
that's how I recharge. Right. That's how I recharge. And when I go out there, oftentimes people say, "Would you entertain?" It's like, no, not really. It's just... No.
You want quiet.
I just want to be able to be there. Mm-hmm. And just sort of not have the phone ringing, the email buzzing.
And not have to talk, maybe.
And not have to talk. And really not have to talk.
I think that's a real luxury.
It is.
Or not have to communicate.
Well, see, my new theory is, everyone talks about being accessible. My new theory is that the new luxury is inaccessibility.
Yeah. And there's there's almost no place to go that you can be inaccessible.
Exactly. And that's why when no one can get to me is when I feel most free.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, even campsites now have outlets for you to charge your cell phone.
Oh, I know. Well, no, it sort of defeats the point, right? It's like, would Thoreau have Wi-Fi? It's just, is that really what we're reduced to now?
Well, and I'll take a day, a weekend where I don't look at my email, but I'm always feeling guilty and having to explain to people, I just didn't look at my email this weekend. I didn't. But I don't do that too often because I feel guilty. But it's so wonderful not to worry about it.
Well, I know, but see, and the weird thing is we've had these expectations imposed on us, right? At one time, before technology, Chris was not around then, I guess, you could go for an entire weekend and never hear from the office.
Right, yes.
You could devote time to your family, your friends, your hobbies, your causes, whatever. And then when you went in on Monday morning, it was like, oh, here I am. Now, I'm tethered to that BlackBerry.
Right. Right. And people, and you do feel guilty. And people do expect to be able to get a hold of you and get a response. There's the man who started the TED conferences, he has this manifesto, and I keep meaning to put it at the bottom of my email, but he said that everyone should put at the bottom of their email, it's no reply necessary, no reply needed. And it's not just NRN, it's not, but, so you can tell people it's okay. You don't have to say great, you don't have to say thanks, no reply necessary. I'm just sending this to you. And I keep thinking I keep forgetting to do that, a little parenthesis.
Oh, I know, but it's terrible because...
Then you don't have...
Right. Well, see, I even feel guilty then even when I have my BlackBerry and I'll get messages from people. And I tend to write in full sentences. And so when I write people just these short things like, got your message, things are good, I feel horrible. Because it's like, no, I should have said, Dear Mary, lovely to hear from you.
I think those formalities are very hard. They're hard for me to shed too. The dear or the... I do usually say hi, but that always seems so...
Oh, I know, but and so when I have to send these sort of short messages because I'm typing on a block, I always feel...
Too.
And then I'll go back to my office and I'll call up that email again and I'll say, I apologize for sending you that curt message, but I was on my it's like, what?
And I get messages like that too from colleagues or from business associates who'll say, I didn't, the same thing. That probably sounded really short, and I didn't mean that.
Right, exactly. So there are all this new etiquette and all these new expectations.
You don't have that. I don't think that's something that is...
Well, the iPhone says sent from my iPhone, so if it says that, I just assume that they understand that that's why it's now...
Why somebody sounds like they were really drunk.
You're not nearly neurotic enough to...
I am, just not...
okay.
Not about that.
No, but it's just very different. It's just very...
Yeah, but I think when you're trained like that, it does say that. So I'm always hoping it'll say I have an Android. It'll sent from my Android or sent from my iPad. So people will know that I have fat fingers and I couldn't,
But I also want to try to make sure that I convey the emotion. Because sometimes if you just say yes, no, I always wonder how are people reading the emotion behind that very short statement. So I always feel like I have to put in something like, yes, please proceed. Thank you! Exclamation point or something. So they realize I'm saying it with a smile on my face or something. So it's not just enough to, I always feel like I have to somehow convey the emotion behind my response, even if it's only a 3-word response. It's very confusing. But it's what we do.
Right. Well, being adaptable. Right. We've had to be very adaptable.
Exactly. Well, you have to be adaptable. And you just have to sometimes, go where you think you need to go. And sometimes be stupid.
Push yourself, like you said, push yourself. And I think that's the hard. And having somebody who is willing to catch you if you fall, which is what you're doing. People need to look for the right bosses as well. I know in this market there's not always that luxury, but it's really important to think about not just I want this job, but who am I working for?
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I know when I was, first starting out, like I said, I had these wonderful mentors, and I knew that I could call them at any time, and if I said, I'm really nervous about this, can you help? They would be there. I mean, I was an MLIS, but they knew that, I had the assurance that if I called them, they could help me out in some way. And they would often say, do you want us to come to that meeting? Do you want us to just sit there and be an observer? Do you want us to do that?
I never had anything like that.
Exactly.
And I think, if we could be that for each other, even more of that.
Exactly. And so no matter how bad I knew something was going to be, I knew that I could always call Gary and say, Gary, this is going to be a bloodbath. And he'd say, don't worry, I'll come down, I'll sit there through it with you.
This is your education, really.
And it was. And that's why I said he taught me how to be a better librarian, but just a better person. We all need those mentors / therapists / personal trainers, personal coaches, whatever you want to call them, or just a shoulder to cry on periodically, right? Some days you just need to cry in your beer. and you just want someone to be there to cry with you.
Making sure that everyone in our profession has that, or seeks it out, or does, if it's not readily available, I'd like to make it more better.
Exactly.
Thank you for listening to DCSLA Radio. For more information about the chapter and how you can get involved, visit our website at www.dc.sla.org.